Hello, you're welcome to another episode of Land of the Rising Scrum as we continue the countdown to the Rugby World Cup 2019 in Russia. Every week between now and the September kickoff, we'll profile a different team set to take part in this year's tournament, speaking to the players, coaches, legends of the tournaments past, and getting an insight into the game in that nation. We're continuing to make our way through Pool A today now with 4 different opponents Ireland will have in Japan. And this time around, we're looking at Russia, who Ireland are going to face in their third pool game in October 3rd in Kobe. This is the second time Russia have qualified for the tournament. 8 years ago in New Zealand, they made their debut, and on that occasion, they also came up against Ireland in the pool stages. A 62-12 win for Ireland in Rotorua on that occasion. Joining me on the line now this afternoon, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Russia's captain and record try scorer, Vasily Artemyev. Vasily, good afternoon, and thanks for joining us on Land of the Rising Scrum.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello.
How are you doing? I'm just going to get straight in, Vas, because as I'm sure a lot of people might have realised there very quickly, and I'm sure they're going to realise in a couple of minutes, you don't sound too particularly Russian. You don't have the strongest Russian accent in the world. There's quite a strong Dublin accent in there. You have a bit of an Irish story behind you. If you could just tell us, I suppose, a little bit about that.
I'll be brief. Came to Ireland, to Dublin in 2002. Went to Blackrock College for 3 years. Then did my university degree in University College Dublin. Did a law degree there. So spent quite a lot of time living in Dublin. So thus the accent.
When you came over initially, from what I read in the past, it wasn't meant to be for such a long period of time. It was really just meant to be for a year or so initially, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was the equivalent of a transition year in Russian school at a time. So just my parents wanted me to experience something different and learn English in the way. So, but when I came to Blackrock, and when I realized how much of a rugby culture there is, and the alma mater of Russian schools rugby, and then as well the people were so welcoming, and I felt so good just living and playing my rugby there and studying. So after a year, I had an option to stay, and I never looked back after that.
And you didn't just come over here and pick up a rugby ball and were good at it. It was something you had played as a kid growing up, and it was something you were interested in carrying on in Dublin. I can't imagine there's a huge amount of rugby being played at kids' levels in Russia. Am I right in saying that, or am I wrong? Back 15 years ago, obviously, in the verge of 21st century, there is rugby was rather trying to survive. In many ways, especially after the difficult 90s in Russia, and but there were notoriously there were a few rugby playing underage clubs and schools around the country. It's a big country, so it's very localized, those rugby points in the country. So I was born in one of those, just 20 kilometers northwest from Moscow in Zelenograd, and it was just one of the big kids clubs over there. So I picked it up at the age of 9, and again never looked back. When you were over in Ireland as well, playing in Blackrock, you were part of a pretty prodigious few teams at Junior Cup and Senior Cup level for them. You won a Junior Cup and a couple of Senior Cups, I think, as well. You were playing alongside the likes of Luke Fitzgerald, Ian Madigan for a time as well, Niall Morris, who also went pro as well. You were one of a very, very seriously good team there. I just remember when I was in my early teens, my brother was a couple of years older than me. We're from Limerick, and he went up to play against you in a game. And I remember I was about 13 or 14 years old, and he comes home and he's talking about how Blackrock had this Russian guy, and he was absolutely amazing. And there was a lot of mystery around you and rumours about where Blackrock found you and how they had scouted you and brought you over here. Was that a kind of a running joke among yourself and your friends when you were in school?
Yeah. It was it was one of those stories that came up somehow, and it was running, and just had to. Sometimes I just had to live with it, and but the truth is, I found my parents, we found the agency actually. The agency does those kind of things to send the students and school children abroad. Found Blackrock. It was just one of the options. So when I had to, I had a list of few kind of schools in around Dublin and Ireland actually that I was offered to go to, and it didn't make much of a difference to me at the time. I didn't know much obviously about schools rugby in general or rugby in Ireland. So I just said that I wanted to continue. I wanted to continue playing rugby when I was over there for a year, and they said, "Oh, here Blackrock College is they play rugby over there. We heard, so we might as well pick that school." So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the story.
Do you keep in touch a lot with some of the lads you would have played with back in Dublin, and some of the friends you would have made? You were here a long time, all told. What was about, I'd say 6-7 years you were probably here, were you?
Nearly 7 years that in total. I do keep in touch a little bit. Obviously, I haven't been back in Ireland for quite several years, and I really miss it, to be honest. I'm a married man. I have a family now. I live back in Russia now as well, and I'm just waiting for an opportunity to bring my family, my daughter who just turned 5, just to show my wife and daughter the country I spent a lot of my youth and adolescence in.
And before you went home and settled fully in Russia, there was a spell as well where you played for the Northampton Saints in the Premiership. I think you were involved in one of those games against Munster around 2011 as well at Thomond Park. Was it Ronan O'Gara's drop goal game?
Yes, 41st or 42nd phase of the ball, giant minutes of the match, and drop goal. Yeah, it was one of those games. Yeah, we were winning for most of it. And that drop goal just sealed it for Munster. But you do remember it, and it does go up in the highlights reel of your career.
When you're constantly reminded of, unfortunately, I'd say that was shortly after you and Russia would have made your debuts at the Rugby World Cup in New Zealand in 2011.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned in the intro there, you came up against Ireland. It was a heavy defeat. It was, the first time you ever played in the tournament. You scored a try, though, in that game against Ireland. It must have been a pretty nice feeling to have got over the line, given the connections you had with Ireland down the years.
Yeah, it's very exciting stuff, obviously, playing at the World Cup. And I was only 23, 24 at the time, and you don't think that much that in depth about who you're playing against. You're just happy to play, and I just remember back in those days, and obviously scoring against Ireland, and only the understanding sinks in after the match. After some time has passed, that it was really a huge experience, and it was just a nice kind of cherry on the cake just to score that try and to have scored a try at the World Cup is a big thing, especially for Russia.
Yeah, I was going to say, because there are so many teams in the tournament every year who, there is a gulf in class between the very best teams and a lot of those tier 2 nations. And I'm sure for a country like Russia, for someone like yourself, just actually getting to a World Cup, being involved in the first Russian team to take part in a World Cup is a pretty big deal for you.
Of course. Again, we had quite a good mix of youth and experience in 2011. And myself and a lot of my friends of the same kind of age, we were about 20, early 20s at the time. It's huge pride. So proud to be able to represent our country at the World Cup, at the biggest kind of rugby stage of the world. It's a little bit different now. Myself and my friends that I went alongside with for the last decade in Russia. We're the experienced part of the team now, and we're leading the team. We're the leadership group, and we're leading the team into the second Russia's World Cup in history. And it feels different now. We've had that experience, and we set higher goals for this tournament now ahead of us. Yeah,
specifically Pool A, Ireland, Scotland, Japan, Samoa. What is a realistic target for Russia in Japan?
Well, first of all, we want to be a very difficult opponent for each of those teams. Where we realistically, we know our chances against Ireland and Scotland. The top 10 nations, the Tier 1 nations. They're the ones leading the rugby in the world. So one of the leaders. But we're playing the first game against Japan, second game against Samoa, and you want to fight hard. And a target or a goal for us would be to get a win at the World Cup. We haven't won a match at the World Cup before, so getting a win would be a very positive result for us.
In terms of style and tactics, what should an Irish audience be expecting to see from you, from the way you play?
Well, we've been working very hard with the new coaching staff that arrived only less than a year ago. Lynn Jones and his Welsh and Irish as well, mix of coaches. They've been working a lot with us, trying to change our understanding of modern international rugby, and trying to get up to date with all the requirements of a modern international game in terms of fitness and speed and intensity. It's a bit difficult because most of our players play in the Russian Championship, the club rugby, and then obviously the intensity isn't as big as most of the European competitions. So it's a challenge, but I think we're doing a lot of work, and eventually all the work will pay off, I'm sure.
Yeah, you mentioned there Lynn Jones and Mark McDermott as well would be the Irish coach involved. What's it like in terms of communication with coaches? Would a lot of the players that you're with, a lot of the Russian players, would their English be up to the level of yours? We'll say, is most of the coaching and communication done in English, or is there someone kind of there acting as an interpreter almost between player and coach?
I've been acting as an interpreter for most players and for meetings for the last 10 years. I've been in the national team, but it's only natural. When I first came to the national team back in 2009, Steve Diamond, the Englishman, just joined the coaching team of the national team, and we've just started our preparation for the qualification for the previous World Cup, for the 2011 World Cup. So I kind of picked up that role pretty quickly. It was only natural to me to translate during trainings and to translate during team video reviews, etc. Now there's a good few guys that speak decent language and decent English, and some of them are nearly fluent. And but for most people, it's easier when I do the interpreting. And then again, we've had the experience working with a professional interpreter before, and it doesn't really work because there's a lot of rugby terminology. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that needs to be translated quickly, and needs to be translated to the level that a rugby man can understand it. So it's easier for me to to take up that role, and it comes naturally at this point. It's been many years that I've been doing that in the national team.
Yeah, did that just make it a natural progression then for you to ultimately become captain of the team if you were, I suppose, the link man between player and coaches for such a long time?
Well, it helped. It helped me to understand the requirements of that role as a captain. I think me becoming a captain was more of a it was coach's decision. It was a Russian head coach at the time who picked me as a captain. So We had for 3 years we were working under a Russian coach, and he didn't have many English-speaking coaches in his coaching team. So he was the one who eventually appointed me as a captain of the team. So it wasn't down to my interpreting skills. It was more, but all that translating and all that communication with the coaches over the years, with the different coaches, I think it helped me to, as I said, to understand the requirements and to take up that role quite naturally.
I might ask you as well about the qualification process for getting into the World Cup. Russia would have qualified. It was quite a complicated process in the end, and controversial one as well, because Romania automatically would have gone through, and ultimately Romania, Spain and Belgium were all given huge points deductions, which ultimately pushed Russia up to the top of the European qualifying group and straight through. Was it a strange feeling knowing your place at the World Cup was sealed in that fashion, or were you just ultimately happy to know that you were going to Japan?
Well, I think eventually it wasn't a strange feeling. It was a feeling that finally, a fairness have shown through, because the teams that got their, Romania, Spain, and Belgium, they got their ban for breaking the World Rugby regulations and doing it consistently over the years. And, the whole process just shone its light on, some shortcomings maybe of the regulation as well, and the shortcomings of the this process of, playing foreign-based players for the national team. So it was just, it was a big thing, and I think the result of this process, the result of this decision, is it's going to take its toll on teams in the future as well. But I don't feel that we're undeservedly kind of given that opportunity. I think when you break the regulations, when you do it consistently over several years, when you finally get the justice done on you, you don't deserve to be at the World Cup. You don't deserve to be playing there. So justice finally have prevailed, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think we deserve to be there, because we've never broken any of those regulations.
And was it something that you would have suspected throughout that process, that other teams were feeling ineligible players?
Not during the process. Just before the process started, I think some facts came to light. I think some journalists have been able to uncover, some history of the players that have been playing for Spain and for Romania primarily. They've played for various national teams before, or national team representative sides before, and they were just and they've been playing for several years for Spain and for Romania also, after that. When those facts were uncovered, it was pretty straightforward what decision has to be taken by World Rugby and by the independent commission that World Rugby has gathered to look at the facts and make a decision, based on those facts. To be honest, something had to be done, because it was done consistently over. It wasn't just a single kind of thing that the teams, a single breach of the regulation they've done. They've been breaching it for years, and they weren't taking the care of they weren't taking the care of making sure that they were fielding eligible players. So that was the case.
And it's something that the Russian Federation probably wouldn't have to worry about as much in their own house, because if you look at the teams down the years, there have been very few project players, like we call them over here, or players who qualified through parental rules or grandparent rules down the years. The bulk of the Russian players over the last 10, 15 years or so have been born and raised in Russia. There is no question mark over eligibility or anything like that. Is that something that, going towards the future, can only really help Russia, that they're producing so many players themselves? They're not relying on bringing in project players from the Southern Hemisphere or from other countries.
Yeah, well, we're in the different kind of circumstances as well. We don't have obviously players from Southern Hemisphere coming to us and staying and playing in Russia, so they can live in Russia in the future, because it's quite strange for them probably. We don't have the luxury of giving the European citizenship to people who pick up the Russian citizenship after they've been living in Russia for enough for enough years. So we don't have that we don't have that much to offer to those players when they come to Russia. So there's a few players at the moment playing in the Russian league, that a couple of guys from Tonga and a few kind of Moldovan and Georgians that may have played for Russian national side, but they've already represented their countries before. So it's more of kind of them making a living in Russia and playing pro rugby in Russian league and getting their kind of salary and making a living out of it. They're not making plans. They don't come to Russia and making plans to play for the Russian national team eventually. So that's not the case. So yeah, that's why that should answer the question why there's pretty much 99 or 100% of the Russian team are Russian born and raised, and Russian families and parents and grandparents.
What's the standard like of the Russian league? We would have got a taste of it with the likes of Yenisei playing in the Challenge Cup over the last few years. Is there a kind of a yardstick you can compare it to, the level the Russian league is at? How does it prepare you to play Test rugby?
Obviously, it's not an ideal. Kind of preparational competition to prepare for the requirements of the modern international, the modern Test game. Especially when you're preparing to play the World Cup. So I could compare a level of kind of top 5-6 clubs in Russia to maybe a kind of Pro D2 level in France, or a championship level in the UK. But it's just that we don't have enough clubs of a similar kind of level that competing against each other and constantly without a clear what you call it, leader, or an obvious. So basically, what I'm trying to say is there's 3 or 4 clubs that are really kind of competing for the championship each year, and the rest of the clubs are a couple of levels below. They're more of a kind of semi-pro kind of transition period, and only maybe top 3 clubs can call themselves fully pro in terms of its approach to preparation. So it's a difficult process. This year's competition is actually first in many years that a lot of the clubs have been able to find good sponsors, and their budgets have been raised dramatically. So they're really kind of pushing to step up a new level in the next couple of years. I think it doesn't just happen overnight, because you need to prepare a base. It's not just money that decides which level you're playing at. you need to prepare and your players and prepare the base for future. So it looks good if things stay the same way they are this year. I think we have a lot more competition in the Russian championship in 2 years' time. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I must point out as well, you're speaking to us this morning from Argentina. I imagine you're over there. You're getting ready for the Nations Cup at the moment,
Yeah. We're playing 3 games in Uruguay between the 4th and 16th of June. Of June. Playing Uruguay, Argentina A, and Namibia. So we are currently in Argentina, just getting a chance to acclimatize before we make a short trip to Uruguay. And we're getting a couple of training sessions together with the Jaguars as well in the meantime. So, which is a really good thing to train against good sides, and it's huge. It's very advantageous. It's not just training within your own group against your own teammates. It's training against top class players.
Yeah, and with the way Jaguars are going in Super Rugby, they are. I know a lot of Australian people have basically called them a test team at the moment. They are the Argentina team, so that can only be great preparation for you. But leading up to the World Cup, there are a couple of more warm-up games scheduled in. I think there's one against Georgia in there as well, is there?
Yeah, we're due to play Italy in Italy on sometime around 17th, 18th of August, and then the plan is to stay in Italy for a week after the game, training together with the local teams and Zebra or someone else, and then travel to Treacy in Georgia to play a test game there. And it's always a huge occasion for a Russian team to play in Georgia. I expect a full house there, and 40,000-50,000 people turn up to our games against Georgia in Tbilisi. So it's a huge rugby festival when we play.
For Tier 2 sides, would Georgia kind of be the yardstick to measure yourself by, with the popularity of the game there as well, and they're pretty much on an upward curve, you'd say?
Well, they've been on that curve for years now. Rugby is the number one team sport in the country. It's a fact. It's a small country, very proud nation, and they love their rugby over there now, and they have their own way. They have their own way of progressing over the last decade or two. They've reached a certain level that's amongst the Tier 2 nations that that we all hope to be sometime. We hope to get where they are at the moment, and it's good to see them constantly progressing, and being a very tough side for some Tier 1 nations to play against.
And Vas, just before we let you go, you'd be well known to a lot of Irish rugby audience. Who else in the rugby squad should the Irish fans be really looking out for at the tournament? Are there any young players maybe who might be as well known over here that you think could make an impact on the game?
Well, definitely. Again, we have a good mix of experience and youth. We have a very young forwards pack, actually. I think the average age is about 25, 26 of our forwards, and there's some very exciting players over there. You can Tagir Gajiev is the number 7 that should be playing at the World Cup, and there's Nikita Vavilin is another back row player that'll be playing at the World Cup. We obviously one of our bigger stars of the team would be Yuri Kushner. He's an experienced out half, heart and soul of our game. Very good mix, and some very talented players. So I think the World Cup will allow the viewers to see the talent in the Russian squad that we have now.
Okay, just a reminder, our rugby coverage on Off the Ball is brought to you by Vodafone. Team of us, everyone in. Vasily Artemyev, thanks a million for taking the time to join us this afternoon. Very best of luck over the next few weeks in Uruguay and also leading on to the World Cup in Japan. We'll keep an eye out for you there.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much. Goodbye.